All right, Ben, excited to have you back for the WeHero learning series here. Today, we're going to talk about a more holistic support of nonprofits before and after a singular volunteer event. We talk a lot about aligning your events with your corporate mission and what your company wants to do on the impact side. And today we want to talk about what does that actually look like? If you're a company that comes to us for one event, how do you keep supporting? And so maybe I'll turn it over to you and kind of say, as you see customers coming to us, where does this need really come out for these customers?
Yeah, I think one way we think of the hundreds of volunteer events that we do and all the thousands more that continue happening for these companies, we really view volunteer as a point of activation. When we do a volunteer experience, yes, there's being impact made there, but there's so much that can be done before and after. So that point of activation where we bring people into a volunteer experience, they get educated about the cause, they get educated about the nonprofit, and then they are hands-on making an impact. That's a huge stepping stone to get people excited about a cause area. We have people that first, sometimes have never even understood that there was an actual challenge in a cause area. We have a program called Period Power. And people did not know that there was period disparity here in the US, and people all of a sudden just become aware of that through this experience. The big question then comes, we do this volunteer experience, we bring all these people together, we're educated about the cause. Now what? And I think the goal of the call today is to really give people some advice on how you can continue making an impact after the volunteer experience as well as before, and what that can look like. WeHero has some services to make that easy. We have some ideas to make that easy on your own. I think it's just for us to talk to that. And I'm happy to dive into each one of those, Andy, and then get your take on what companies can do.
Well, let's structure this for the companies that end up here. Let's take two approaches. Let's say you're a small company and you do a volunteer event and you can only do one thing after the event. What would you do? And we'll dive into a more complex company that wants to do a bunch of initiatives after a volunteer event. What would you do if you could only do one initiative after the event?
Great question. I think it very much depends on the cause. So if it's an environmental cause, an environmental volunteer experience, like a reforestation event, I think the thing that I would want to do is an in-person tree planting experience after that volunteer event, right? Like just take it to the next level. And we work with a nonprofit partner called One Tree Planted that plans these all over the country. Whereas for a different volunteer experience where I'm like working with Meals on Wheels, for example, supporting seniors, maybe an action that I'm taking is writing letters every single week, just making it a routine part of my schedule. And so I think it really depends. And so I'm just totally destroying your question of like, here's the one thing that comes to mind right out the gate as a priority. But curious, I'm going to throw the question right back at you. Like you go through one of these volunteer experiences or a small company does, like, what's the one thing you think a company can do immediately afterwards?
I'm also going to have a little bit of a cop-out answer here. I think what you need to do is you need to capture the engagement of the employees after the event and magnify that in whatever way you think is appropriate. And it's different for every company. Some companies, they can do a crowdfunding campaign. They can do a donation campaign after the event once everyone's passionate about it and can go share the story. So you can go that route. Or you can say, hey, my employees want to keep giving. Set up bi-weekly simple volunteering initiatives with a subset of the group and say, hey, if you have time, come write letters for Meals on Wheels. We'll write letters to the elderly. And so I think those are kind of whatever I would do would be centered around increasing the engagement that comes from that event. And you and I, we spend so much time thinking about creative solutions for companies. There's so much fun things to do here. Whether it's using an app to track walking distance and donating based on your walking distance instead of driving, so many different things. But I think the main goal would be to capture the engagement and the excitement that people have so your company can do more good for that cause, as well as, keep your employees extremely engaged.
Yeah, and to that point, and maybe I'm jumping the gun going into some ideas that companies can do right out the gate, but your point around we have this audience, how do you continue amplifying that engagement? I think one of the best things these employee groups can do is just share the message, right? And we had a volunteer event supporting the Greater Chicago Food Depository. It's a food bank in Chicago, and employees volunteering asking, "What can we do after this experience?" And he was pushing so hard, just like, please share with your friends and family about the cause, about the current challenges in the US around food insecurity and what can actually be done. So much of it is just sharing the word. And we have people do that all the time. We see so many companies that are going on LinkedIn, talking about the experience they had, talking about the impact that was being made. And as a result, more people and more companies like taking to the ranks to make an impact. It makes a huge difference. And just again, jumping to a step that companies and employees can take right out the gate to just make a bigger difference.
Yeah, totally. I think, um, you know, I love talking about that with people. If we can bring 100 people together, go home to your family, your friends, and share it with 2 people. Even if half those people take action, the education component is so important here. And so that's the simplest, easiest, cost-free, effort-free way to magnify the impact after an event. Um, I think, if we pivot to larger companies and the potentials that they can have, or companies with more resources, there's a really interesting interconnection between, a standard time-based volunteer event and then skills-based, and how the two can interconnect. Before event, after event, an ongoing arrangement. Would be really curious, companies that do both of those well and interconnect them. Why do you think they do it, and what do you think makes those programs successful?
I think why they do it is so often employees do one of these experiences and become emotionally connected to the cause, which is so amazing that, and again, back to that point of activation, then it comes to how can we increase the impact and keep staying involved. And so skills based is an amazing opportunity. You do this 1 hour event of volunteering, and then you go, how can I keep making impact? Doing a skills based project where you're actually working to understand some of the gaps and challenges that organization has, and using your talents of your team to go in and solve some of those challenges, it maximizes impact. Also gives you the opportunity to further engage with the organization. And what comes out of that just continuous engagement over and over again. We see so many companies, to your point, Andy, they do a volunteer event, then they move into skills based. And then we see companies start making grants to the nonprofit. And all of a sudden, this blossoming relationship occurs where the employees are connected with the cause. The cause is now connected with the company, and the company is supporting and maximizing impact in every way, shape, or form. And those blossoming relationships, just one of the most beautiful things that we could ever see or expect coming out of a volunteer experience. So long-winded answer to your question, but I would love your take too. Just skills base is such a new thing. Any ideas of examples of that you've seen, and just what companies can think about when they're taking that leap from a curated volunteer event to like, we're going to do skills based now?
Yeah, I think it is a new thing, but I think some companies do this remarkably well.
Mhm.
And if I can just quickly jump in there on something you said before I dive into that, you brought up kind of keeping employees engaged in this, and if I become an advocate for employees, I think employees need to have the choice of these things. And so, what do the employees care about that aligns with your mission? And then, how do you reward employees for being engaged? You can reward them with the time-based volunteer events. Some companies do fundraisers. Whichever employees raise the most money then get to go do skills based for a day a month, because they're so passionate about that and proven that. And that really creates engagement, involvement, and really aligns the employee with what your company's goals are. And I always am a big fan of adding competition to anything. And so I think that's a really good approach. You asked me about skills based and how companies interconnect that and involve them. I think there's a few ways I've seen really successful um, is you have a skills based project that kind of, let's say it's a 3-month project, you're spending a few hours a week on it. You have that start, and about halfway through, you have a volunteer event for a much larger group of people. And that group of people actually leads the volunteer event and talks about the work that they're doing for the nonprofit. And I think that's awesome because it turns the company's individuals to spokespeople of the nonprofit, and it gets people to better understand the engagement level of the company and what they're doing. And so I think that's one really awesome tool that can be used. The other that I love is the executive involvement in skills based. Executive time is so valuable and so precious. But if you can successfully have the executive team or leadership team, prove to the employees that the company cares about this by solving problems for the nonprofit, that just creates a great bond between, mass employees and the leadership team and what they're doing. And I've seen a few companies do that remarkably well, and it gets more buy-in from the entire company. Long-winded answer, but those are two scenarios that I think work really well.
Yeah, just an example to double tap on the importance of executive participation. We had an employee base that was doing a volunteer event, and unexpectedly, their executive, the CEO, joined. It was one of our events called Wine to Water. We're building water filters. One of these water filters that an employee built gave 10 people clean water for 10 years. The CEO jumped on about 5 minutes into the event. And he saw all the employees like just amazed and so excited that he took the time to be there, an hour out of his incredibly busy day to be there and go, this is really important for us as a company to do, and I'm going to be here for this. And just engaged in asking questions. And just to double tap on the importance of like having executives be a part of these social campaigns and these social initiatives at a company just makes a massive difference. I mean, those employees were just so excited and engaged because the CEO showed up. It's just amazing to see that transformation.
Yeah. What you just said, I think, is so important about executive involvement. But what else you said is you were like a social campaign. And I think the more, if we were to take one holistic view, and I'll speak for you and let me know if you disagree, what you need to do to be successful in this is take an event and turn it into a campaign. And you need that campaign to align with your company's impact vision. All of those three things need to be aligned. And if you can make that company vision match what the employees want to do, that's where you're really going to see, I don't want to say flywheel effects, but flywheel effects for your impact campaign that's really going to benefit your employee base, retention, but also the business. And so I would say that's where we've seen things going. And I think that trend will only continue.
I totally agree. So, nope, you don't have to worry about me disagreeing with you on that.
This is what's great about the WeHero learning series. We get to do a little brain think, and Ben and I's brain tends to work very similar. So we have similar views on things.
Sync together. Yeah. Other things that people can do, like other ideas for ways that people can, follow up after an event and keep making an impact.
Just you want some more examples?
Asking you, and then I can jump in and throw in a few more as well.
Yeah, I think the education component is really big afterwards. And so whatever your employees can do, can you provide them education materials to talk to the rest of their team about this? And I almost like companies to budget for multiple events. So you have one event of a core group, and then they go educate that. And then you have a second event that all these people hear about what their employees did and they want to, their colleagues did, and they want to do that as well. And so you can always just multiply that. I think there needs to be some giving component, whether that's, the app that we talked about, whether it's using our Chrome extension, whether it's just a crowdfunding campaign, whether it's on your CSR platform, some giving component. And then I like to also do some competition as well, just to kind of mark the beginning and the end of the campaign. And finally, I know I'm just blurting out a lot of things. I would say finally, you need to think about how you market that campaign, especially if you're a larger company that needs to market that internally or externally, and how you talk about impact at the end of the campaign. That's that in my view is very important.
Yeah, to touch on some of the things that you just mentioned, like giving employees the tools to spread the word. Some ideas for folks that are hosting volunteer events or doing volunteer events. Some of the things that WeHero does that you can take and run with is providing those resources. A good example is for WeHero's reforestation experience. We always send a thank you email. That thank you email details a couple things: the impact of the experience from A to Z, so like the impact of the time. B, we provide tools, first off, to get in touch with One Tree Planted, and also resources to do like in-person planting experience, but also like another tool called the Global Forest Watch, which is a way that people can actually see what's happening with their tree canopy in their local county. And I think that's just an example of providing people with tools to continue immersing and educating themselves in really cool, unique ways, as well as being able to spread the word and share about the good that they're actually doing. And to that point, I always tell people, like during the volunteer events, is like, if you really enjoyed like this experience, follow the nonprofit. Like these nonprofits we work with the best nonprofits in the world, but for anybody that's doing these volunteer events, like follow the nonprofit, their stories are incredible. If you subscribe to their email, you don't get blasted for donations. Oftentimes they're just giving you content, educating you about the cause and updates about what they are doing. And that's just a great way to stay involved and educate yourself and keep sharing the word of what's going on.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. And like we always say, if you are doing an event with us, if you're planning your own event, whatever it may be, give us a call. We're happy to share ideas of what we've seen that can turn your event into more of a holistic experience for your employees as well as just for your whole entire company. And so feel free to reach out to us, and we are always happy to discuss and share ideas and help out in any way we can.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Keep the impact going. That's the theme here.
Yeah, keep the impact going and maximize it. Well, Ben, thank you again for joining, and we will be back here soon.
Thanks, everybody.